So for the next 30 minutes, we put the spotlight on all the top stories from around the world. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Our top story, a high-stakes day of diplomacy in Washington. US President Donald Trump welcomed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky along with 7 European leaders to the White House. The series of meetings included both a one-on-one with Zelensky and a broader gathering with European heads of state. Observers say the Trump-Zelensky meeting was far more warm and conciliatory than their heated exchange just months ago. Trump floated the idea of security guarantees for Ukraine, supported by European partners, but offered no concrete timelines or framework for a peace agreement. The Ukrainian president, for his part, repeatedly expressed gratitude for American support. On social media, President Trump revealed he's now working to set up a meeting between Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is first bilateral and then possibly a trilateral summit. Zelensky, speaking at a news conference, said he is ready to meet Putin in any format. And in a lighter moment, Trump, who had once criticized Zelensky for turning up to the Oval Office in combat fatigues, this time praised him for wearing a suit.
President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good on
I
you.
said the one that attacked you last time. See, now he said, I remember that.
I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed, you are not.
Is there a date for you to meet with President Putin?
The date?
Yes.
No, we don't have any date. We don't have any date. We just confirmed after this productive meeting with President and then with all our colleagues, with the partners, we confirmed that we are ready for a trilateral meeting. And if Russia proposed to President of the United States bilateral, and then we will see the result of bilateral, and then it can be the trilateral. So I said always, so Ukraine will never stop on the way to peace, and we are ready for any kind of format, but on the level of leaders.
There'll be a lot of help. When it comes to security, there's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe. But we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved. But we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal while they're fighting. They have to fight. I wish they could stop. I'd like them to stop. But strategically, that could be a disadvantage for one side or the other. But all of these deals I made without even the mention of the words ceasefire.
And joining me now to discuss this further is Daniel Fried, former U.S. Ambassador to Poland and Distinguished Fellow at the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Fried, thank you very much for joining us on the program. If I were to ask you to rate the success of the Trump administration with this meeting with Zelensky, European leaders, in the backdrop of what has happened with Putin, how would you rate the success and why?
A lot better than the blow-up in the Oval Office last February, and a lot better than the meeting in Anchorage between Trump and Putin. The meetings in the White House yesterday were a step forward, not dispositive, but you can see the outlines of a sustainable peace emerging if, but only if, the Americans and the Europeans are serious about security for Ukraine. They're going to have to stare down Putin. Trump will have to do that too. We're not there yet, but you can see a plausible path to a peace which is not just. It won't be a just peace while parts of Ukraine are occupied, but it could be a sustainable peace. So we are better off than we were, but major tests, in fact, the major tests are yet to come.
Right. Do you think the U.S. president has enough leverage to make Putin agree to a deal? Because currently what Putin is asking for in terms of letting him control territories like Donbass, this is not going to be acceptable to either Ukraine or the Europeans.
Well, the U.S. does have leverage, and we shouldn't let it leak away. I was astonished to hear Secretary of State Marco Rubio over the weekend say that we shouldn't use economic pressure against Russia because it would harm diplomacy. What? Economic pressure is what is going to back diplomacy. We have economic tools to put pressure on the Russians. We have the ability to put even more pressure by arming Ukraine and by setting up mechanisms to make sure that the flow of arms will continue. We should use that leverage and not simply back away in the name of what? Goodwill? Are we kidding? Putin is not a person of goodwill. He is a person who will respect strength, and we need to show it. But I think that the meetings yesterday were moving in the right direction. Only, as I said, we're going to have to maintain our strength and stare down Putin. That won't be easy.
Right. Now, in terms of imposing further sanctions, what would you be recommending and alluding to?
Well, look, the tariffs against India for purchasing Russian oil were, how can I put this, clumsy. Okay, why pick on India in particular? That as a signal to push back against the Russians, I get it, but that wouldn't be the way I would go. Still, if you want to put economic pressure on Russia, you have to go after its oil sales. You have to go after its revenue. The point is to take money out of Putin's war machine, not simply reduce the volume of oil going out. We have options, maybe a little less clumsy than tariffs against India. There are ways to do this, and we need to mean it. And if we do, Russia's economy, which isn't in great shape, is going to get a lot worse. So we have the ability to push Putin. He's very good at bluff. He's very good at brag. He's very good at strutting around. But so were the Soviet leaders for a while, and that didn't turn out so well for them. Right.
Ambassador Fried, you said that US should not pick on India. Are these tariffs, there are 25% additional tariffs which are going to come into effect on the 27th of August. That will take the tariffs on Indian products to 50%. Do you think Trump is unnecessarily damaging a good bilateral relationship? And by damaging this, sacrificing India, he's not going to make any headway with Russia on ending the war in Ukraine?
Well, going after India alone while not touching China undercuts the purpose of the move. As a kind of abstract signal, I understand it, but that would not be my preferred policy approach. If you're going to go after the revenue from Russian oil sales, you have to be even-handed and go after all the purchasers of Russian oil, and you have to figure out a way that you're not hurting them, but lowering the revenue Russia gets for selling the oil. There are some ways to do that. With Iran, we threaten sanctions against countries like China and India that were buying Iranian oil, but we waive those sanctions if China and India and other countries were significantly lowering their purchases of Iranian oil. Something like that might work. Or finding a way to put taxes and take some of the money from Russian oil sales if they use Western tankers. And we ought to make sure we go after the shadow fleet so they can't use tankers off the system. My point is that there are ways to do this that don't single out individual countries. And going after India first and only would not be my first choice, put it that way.
Right. What we'd also like to ask you, did you get a sense that Ukraine and President Zelensky handled President Trump much better this time? There was a lot of warmth from the time he got down from his SUV at the White House. Zelensky said, President Trump, I'm wearing my best. And President Trump said, I love your suit. Do you think Zelensky came better prepared this time around?
He did. I was watching live the February meeting in the Oval Office, and it was a disaster because Zelensky was trying to win an argument. That's not the point. The point is to advance your objectives, which is not the same as winning the argument. This time, Zelensky did it right. Look, I am no particular fan of President Trump's style, but it doesn't matter what I think. The fact is, Zelensky, the Europeans, everybody needs to take this into account and act accordingly. Yesterday's meeting was a success. The Americans offered something we've never offered before, which is to participate in security guarantees for Ukraine. That's a very big deal, and I give Trump credit for it. Now, we have to find out what that means. The Russians will hate it. They will fight it. We're going to have to push back. And Trump has never been willing to actually push back hard against Putin, and he will have to in the future if this is going to work. But after yesterday's meetings, it's pretty clear that there's a path forward if we have the strength to take it.
Right. Ambassador Fried, the impression that one gets in India is that more than Putin, it is Donald Trump who wants an exit from the US out of this war. At the start of the Trump administration 2.0, Donald Trump said he'll be able to end this war very soon. He's not been able to do so. It is challenging. Considering the circumstances right now, what do you think will be the terms that would finally be agreeable to both parties, Ukraine and Russia?
There have always been two big elements to a sustainable settlement. Most important is security for Ukraine. Ukraine simply can't rely on Russia's promises. That's worthless. A peace which leaves Ukraine in a gray zone of insecurity is simply an invitation to the next war. So there has to be security for Ukraine. That security has to be backed up either by NATO, that would be my first choice, or this European coalition of the willing with US backup. It can be done. The second issue is territory. It's not right to ask Ukraine to give up its territory. The best solution would be a settlement based on a provisional but not time-limited line of contact, like the line between East and West Germany, never intended to be permanent, but it kept the peace during the Cold War, or the Korean armistice line, not permanent, but it's worked for 75 years. Something like that would be best. If it comes to a formal transfer of territory, this violates a whole lot of US policy and international law. It's a bad idea. If the Ukrainians agree to it, they're not going to agree to Russia's terms. Russia wants the Donbass, it wants to keep Crimea, but it can't demand Ukraine retreat from territories Russia hasn't been able to conquer. So the territorial issue is a big one. I can see not a peace that isn't just, but might be lasting. That could happen. Security and territory are the two big issues. And Zelensky is not going to settle. He won't settle on territory until he has security.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Fried, for joining us with those very important remarks. That's all we had time for on this segment. Let's move on and take a look